Thursday, January 29th. I'm Adam Walsh, and this is The Signal. Today on the show, Dennis Browne has resigned as Newfoundland and Labrador's consumer advocate after a decade serving in the role. He's here as my guest for a lunchtime hangout. We're going to talk the last 10 years and other issues he's been focused on. Dennis Browne, welcome to The Signal. How you doing?
Good morning, Adam. I made it through the snow and the wind that's starting out there again.
I know. Thank you for coming in because it is, quite windy. I mean, I know the sun is, for those of you not in St. John's, the sun is out, but it's a brisk winter day. So I was emailing you last week because I was like, I want to talk to the consumer advocate about some of the emails I knew you were getting about electricity rates and everything else, or electricity bills, I should say. And then Monday came, and I came to work because, like, I emailed you, and you're like, check back in with me on Monday. I was like, okay. So I came to work, and it's like, Dennis Browne has resigned. I was like, okay, so I guess he's not coming on the show, but you are on the show because you're not in the role anymore. But I sent you another note and said, do you want to come talk about the last 10 years and a few other things? So, folks, the way this is going to work today, myself and Mr. Browne will have a discussion, and we will open the phone lines probably in about 20 minutes or so. So and the text line is open as well. So if you've got thoughts or questions for us, the text line is there, 709-327-8206. Emails thesignal@cbc.ca. Mr. Browne and I will have a chat, and then we'll just see where everything goes. But, Dennis, I feel this is late to ask you this, but who are you?
It's an interesting question. People forget about where you came from and what you did. I grew up in Grand Falls.
Yeah.
My mother worked in the hospital there in the switchboard. My father had worked in Grand Falls in the mill in the union and got in some union trouble and ended up working in the Upper Churchill of all places. So we became familiar with the Upper Churchill early on and the work that was done there, which was quite successful. When I left Grand Falls, I did a few other things, went to the university, and ended up in law school, went to Dalhousie, where I studied labor and administrative law. Came back to St. John's, met my wife, Susan Chalker, at a party. And we were on the go for a couple of years, and then we married. And that was really interesting because Susan's father was Jim Chalker at Chalker, Green and Rowe, the most prominent corporate law firm in the province. Jim did work for international companies. He did work for the Russians on Aeroflot. He did work for the Japanese government on the bankruptcy, the largest bankruptcy in Newfoundland, or indeed Canadian history, I think it was, at Come By Chance. So he was very, very prominent. And I remember on our first date, I went over and Jim had married Barbara Galway, and she was one of the Galway girls. The Galways were great dancers and got dancing schools on the go all over St. John's. But there was something else particular about them. 5 of them married lawyers. Mary married Doug Tucker. Teresita married Tommy Williams, Danny's father. Carmel married John Mahoney. He was Minister of Justice with Smallwood and then on the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeal. Isabel married Noel Goodrich, who became Chief Justice in Newfoundland. And, of course, Barbara married Jim Chalker. And I remember going there on a first date, and they invited me in, and they were having some kind of dinner for all the relatives, all the Galway girls and their husbands. Well, it was like a meeting at the bar. And I said, who are these people, the most prominent lawyers in St. John's? And I got to meet them all, and then we went on our date. I was glad to get out of the house. I was just a young lawyer, just called to the bar. So I didn't go with any other firms or anyone. I went with a private firm that was at the time right next to the Duke of Duckworth, which was quite a happy occasion to have on a Friday at the end of the day.
Yeah, so convenient location there.
Very convenient. So I started doing labor law and administrative law, and I got became an arbitrator. And I got to know the unions, employers, and I was doing that for 5 or 6 or 7 years. And Clive Wells invited me to become chairman of the Labour Board because they always had the chair from the panel of arbitrators. And I agreed to do that. So that was an interesting job that I had. I still worked at our law firm, but I did cases there as called to be. And you're dealing with experts. On the board itself, you had expert unions. On the board itself, you had expert employers. And all the top prominent expert lawyers on labor law were speaking there, Randy Earl and Norm Whalen and Dana Lenehan and Harold Smith and others. So you had a really interesting time to get to know administrative law and the way to go about it all. And first when I got there, though, I noticed that their rules of procedure they were using weren't up to date. So they were not exactly pre or post-Confederation, but close. So the first thing I did, got all the groups together and we did all their rules of procedure to make sure everyone had ample opportunity to speak and everyone was heard. That was a good job. In 1998, I guess, I got a call from Ed Roberts, who was Minister of Justice at the time, and he asked me to do a case at the Public Utilities Board. And I said, I don't know anything about the Public Utilities Board. He said, hang on, you're an administrative lawyer. You're running that board up there. You know procedures. So indeed, I got off the Labour Board and I decided to do this case. And Ed said, I only have one question to ask you. And I said, what's that? And he said, do you have shares in Fortis? And I said, no. He said, in that case, you're qualified. Go down and do the job. So I went down there, and that was sort of really interesting because the rules of procedure they had were just post-Confederation. They hadn't changed any rules. And I went down there, and we had a table, the ratepayers, sort of in the back of the room. Right up front, they had Newfoundland Power, the applicant, on the side of the board. And on the other side was the board's executive and officers and so on, and the panel was in front. And we were down sort of in the back of the room. So I said, wait a minute here. I said, I'm at the Labour Relations Board. Both parties, the applicant and the respondent, who's us, the ratepayers, you should be right down here. So I asked for an adjournment. I said, I want that moved. This is not a good image for the board. So they stopped it and they put them down front where they ought to be. And then he said, the chair was David Vardy at the time. He had just left the government. He was chair of the board. I said, I got another complaint. You'll have to hear this out. I said, the rules you have are 1950, post-Confederation. I said, everything has changed. You don't have rules of procedure to assist this body, and certainly not to assist the ratepayers. I said, we can't proceed until we have these rules changed and modernized. And one of the senior members on the panel said, you hold your tongue. We're saying too much. So I sat down, and he had his say. And then I asked for an adjournment. So they came back after the adjournment, and I said, that panel member who's saying I'm saying too much and I want the rules of procedure changed, I want him to disqualify himself if he has made up his mind on these issues. Because he's already stated the case, which probably favors Newfoundland Power. I said, I want to confirm that he has an open mind before we can proceed. So they had another adjournment, and Vardy went out and interviewed him. He said, no. He said he has an open mind. He will listen to you. So we stopped and agreed to do new rules of procedure, which brought the panel up to date with other jurisdictions, which really helped the ratepayers. So that took about 2 weeks, and we went down and we went by the new rules of procedure. So that was my introduction to the Public Utilities Board.
So this is so we're talking like 98.
We did pretty good in that case too, by the way.
So this is like, this is the start for you. Did you ever think the road ahead would you'd have as much involvement as you have had with ratepayers and the price of electricity in this province?
No, I sort of fell into it, so I kept that position till 2004, from 1998 for about 6 years.
Yeah.
I was probably ready to move on. That's all you need in a particular job. But anyway, Danny Williams got elected, and he wiped out anyone that had been appointed by the previous government from various positions, and he seemed to want his own people on there. So he put Tom Johnson on as consumer advocate. I met with Tom and gave him the files and everything, and I didn't particularly mind any of that. I was ready to go. We just had one case. The order had come out, and I thought they should have left me there till that order came out, but I gave all that to Tom, and Tom was there then until Ball got elected as premier. So this is interesting for the public. When Ball got elected as premier, he put in place an independent appointments commission. He said he didn't want to deal with all everyone having political appointments and him being called by members of the party for jobs and everything that had been done previously, all the old ways. So the first legislation he brought in was for an independent appointments commission, and he wouldn't appoint anyone until that legislation was approved. And so Tom Johnson stayed on with Ball as premier until the Independent Appointments Commission came in. Ball said, I'm not reappointing anyone to any positions until that came in. This is the correct thing to do. Everyone should have an opportunity for a job on an appointment. So when that came on, I wasn't that enthused about applying, but said I'd been there, and I had been with the 2041 group at that point, right?
Yeah,
the
so
Muskrat Falls.
Yeah, exactly. This is the group that was calling out, trying to get attention to Muskrat Falls.
Yeah,
and saying it was a bad deal.
So I knew a lot of issues. So a lot of them called me and said, yeah, why don't you go and take that? And so I did. I said I can only apply. I might not get it. And indeed, Tom was free to apply. Tom could have applied too. So I applied and I got an interview, and there were other people who got interviews, and I was interviewed by Shani Duff, I remember. She was vice chair of the board, and others, and that went on for a couple of hours. I didn't think I had the job. I didn't hear anything for about 2 months, and then I got a call from Andrew Parsons and said, you've been appointed to this job. I guess they scrutinized the applications, and anyway, I don't know what they did. So I accepted. So that's how I got appointed.
So what is, when we say consumer advocate, because if I Google your name and your previous position that you spent 10 years in, I'll see a lot about ratepayers. What is the work of the consumer advocate, and what did you do over the course of 10 years?
The work is limited. You're limited to your appointment. You're appointed as consumer advocate to represent ratepayers at the Public Utilities Board. I don't represent food pricing, or I don't represent other activities that would demand a consumer advocate, phone bills, other things. I don't do that. And I represent ratepayers collectively. I don't deal with individual cases. That's not my job. Individual cases has an outlet for people to call the board itself if they have a complaint. So I wasn't dealing with individual cases. As consumer advocate, I did get appointed early on to examine gas prices and gas pricing in the province. So I did that, and I worked with all the gas companies, Irving's and the other major companies, to find out their pricing structures. And we got a lot of confidential information, but we weren't denied information, and we gave a report to the board on it, a report to the government on it, and they eventually put in that pricing structure that changes every Thursday.
Yeah,
for gas prices.
I get the releases.
Yeah, I think Grimes, when he was premier, put that in, so that was there, and that came about. And then I was asked to do the Muskrat Falls inquiry and to represent ratepayers at the Muskrat Falls inquiry, which the government had announced in 2017. And I looked at that, and I looked at their terms of reference, which were very good. And I was interested in this because I knew Muskrat Falls. I was on the 2041 committee with Ed Hearn and Cabot Martin and Uncle Gnarly and all these people who knew that file. And it was a great experience and a great learning experience for me on Muskrat Falls. And I knew why it should never have been implemented and why the people of the province should never have been subject to it, because they made us, the ratepayers, responsible for the cost. I said, how could that possibly be? And it's turned out to be to our detriment big time. So I did that.
Question on the ratepayers at this moment. So you talk about the Muskrat Falls side of it and what the ratepayers, the costs that everyone is bearing after this. At this point in time now, just a few days of you leaving the post as consumer advocate, what is your outlook for the ratepayer of Newfoundland and Labrador, or I'll say of Newfoundland mainly, but what's your outlook for ratepayers in this province of looking at where we are now and what you think may or may not be to come?
Yeah, I left the position in December, by the way.
Yes, exactly. You put that in December.
I notified the government that I will leave the position, and I knew they will have a certain amount of time to put in a new consumer advocate under the Independent Appointments Commission. I knew that would take probably 60 days. So I said, I will do the work for 60 days as I always have. And then when you go to the Independent Appointments Commission, you could have everyone apply for it and everyone is given a fair shake. So where are we with rates? Well, today people are paying 15.2 cents for electricity. When I took over in 2015, it was probably 12 cents. Mm-hmm. But the electricity price is really tied into the price of oil, too. So as oil goes up, and it went up dramatically for that period, because we're buying so much oil for come by chance for the thermal generation, such thermal generation we were told would not take place once Muskrat Falls got in, that turned out to be not true. So, among other things. So anyways, the ratepayers right now are paying 15.2. They have to pay 2.25% every year to help pay for Muskrat Falls forward. But there's also a big problem coming because our rates are subsidized right now to the tune of $500 million annually, and that comes from the subsidy to make rates affordable, because if we didn't have that, our electricity rates would be about 23 cents a kilowatt, thanks to Muskrat Falls. That subsidy ends in about 36, 38 months, and the government is going to have to deal with it. They don't have that money. They got the money from the federal government through Hibernia and the money that was due the feds from Hibernia. They gave us that. They put in a lot more money which should have been used for hospitals. I just saw they're canceling a hospital out there in CBS somewhere.
The new hospital plan for the replacement for St. Clair's.
If we had that Muskrat Falls money, if we hadn't gone, we'd have that money. So it's been to our detriment in every which way. So until something is done, until a plan is put in place, and I don't see any plan in place, I'm worried. Electricity could go up to 23 or 24 cents a kilowatt, which will be unaffordable.
Right. How many emails have you been getting recently just around? Because there was 2 rate increases plus cold winter. Newfoundland Power says that their meters are 99% accurate, higher than standard. But what are the concerns that you've been hearing from folks around bills lately? Just that they're high and higher than expected.
Well, as I said earlier, my mandate is not individual complaints.
No, I know, but you've been getting emails.
But I got emails because someone did me the favor of putting our phone number, my office phone number, on the internet and our email. So I started getting hundreds of emails and phone calls from ratepayers all over the province. It wasn't exclusive to any particular area. I started reading the emails and the problems people were having. People were having double electricity bills, triple electricity bills, even though they were on oil heat. And some of the stories required investigation. And quite a number of people say it's no sense calling Newfoundland Power. They're saying, yeah, you got that done because it's colder. And a lot of people say, yeah, we know, but we got oil heat. What's the problem here? So they had no confidence in Newfoundland Power. They have no confidence in their metering system, and they have no confidence in their investigation. So I wanted the board to be involved and do a complete investigation. Anyway, while I was doing all this work for the last 3 weeks, I had told the board the government, I was ready to continue on as consumer advocate till they had someone appropriate put in under the Independent Appointments Commission, which I knew would take months. So I was doing the work. I got a call one day and said, they rescinded your appointment while I was doing all this work for the ratepayers, and they put in someone who's not appointed by the Independent Appointments Commission, essentially, someone they chose. So I said, very good. I said, what am I to do with all this work? And they said, well, you can pass it on to the new consumer advocate. And I tried to get a hold of her, and she's doing an inquiry up in Labrador. I think she's on that Labrador panel. So none of this makes any sense to me, but we can talk about that later.
Yeah, and just as I was talking to my colleague Terry Roberts about Adrian Ding, who's your replacement, he sent a note, and what we got back was just what you said, sir. She said, "My apologies, I'm unavailable as I'm in the middle of inquiry hearings, and will be until Friday representing an Innu family in the death investigation healing circle." So that's the latest from Adrian Ding, your replacement. And when Maddie Ryan, reporter colleague of mine, asked the Premier yesterday, I believe, about the independent selection process, the answer was, would it be used for independent appointment commission? The response was just yes. So this is where we are on your replacement so far, for the latest that I know around it.
Well, it's not. It's not done according to the Independent Appointments Commission, and it's not done, in my view, according to law, because the law says that they can put someone in due to urgent or extenuating circumstances. Well, I was there. I was offering to do that work until they got someone in correctly through the Independent Appointments Commission, so anyone could be able to apply. I was thinking the other day, Paddy Daly would have been such a great consumer advocate, and you don't have to be a lawyer. As consumer advocate, you can retain your lawyer.
He doesn't have. He's moved on from one job, so you never know.
But wouldn't he be great to have that job, and others?
Yeah.
But why should a precedent? Why should they give someone a head start? So when they make their application, they say, "Oh, right now I'm doing it acting." Therefore, when they go before the commission, they have a head start. That was the whole purpose of the public. Of the Independent Appointments Commission with Ball. No one called me to give me a head start and take away the job from Tom Johnson. Tom stayed in that job until they were ready, and that was the correct thing to do. And what they've done now is not the correct thing to do and ought to be revisited.
So why do you think it happened this way?
I have no idea. They have to explain that to the public of the province. There was no need for them to have done it that way. The legislature is not in session. So what? I said I would do it until they had time to do it before the Independent Appointments Commission. The Independent Appointments Commission, I understood, had notice of the application from the government. They could have had all this in place and done within the next 40 days. There was no need to have done that. And it's very difficult for me to give all these files to the current person that they've got in place, because it's an interim appointment. Sometimes when there are interim appointments, the person who receives the interim appointment is not allowed to apply for the job. That's common practice in administrative law. So they don't get a head start on others. So it seems to me they're gone back to all the old ways, if we know you and know who you are, we're going to put you in. That is not what the Independent Appointments Commission was set up for. The Independent Appointments Commission was set up to give everyone a chance.
You're listening to The Signal. I'm Adam Walsh. My guest today, former consumer advocate Dennis Browne. We're talking about the past 10 years of being a consumer advocate with Mr. Browne, some of the ins and outs and some of the big topics from electricity rates to Muskrat Falls and more. If you've got questions or thoughts for us, 709-722-7111. 1-800-563-8255. You can text us, 709-327-8206, the signal at cbc.ca. So from 2041 to Muskrat Falls, and then as consumer advocate, you end up getting a call to be on a 3-person, board committee to overlook for the MOU for Churchill Falls. I know you can only talk. There's certain things you can't talk about with this, but what can you say about it?
Yeah, I got a call I forget the date now. It was several months ago, obviously, but I got a call. My initial call was from the NDP.
Yeah.
And as consumer advocate, the NDP had often called me on issues. So that wasn't a surprise. The NDP were right into the job we were doing as consumer advocate and had often called on various issues. And I was pleased to get their call. And I was asked about this MOU. I knew nothing about it. I knew that they had the MOU because I was invited with the unions and the others to the advance briefing. I knew nothing about it before then. And the only thing I said about it after, I was surprised. I was flabbergasted that Legault had agreed to reopen the contract to ensure we got $17 billion. And I said, I must say I'm surprised at that. But I also said, there are definitive agreements here. We got to see what the definitive agreements will be before we can conclude anything. So the NDP called and asked me to do it. The independents wanted me to do it. The government asked me to do it. And I went home and discussed it with Susan. And we had already discussed my leaving this job because I wanted to go back to my law office full-time, where I am now, doing the things you do at lawyer, wills, contracts, et cetera, et cetera. So my first inclination was to say no, but then I said maybe I'm suited for it. So I agreed to represent the ratepayers. This is who I was representing.
Yeah.
The ratepayers of the province. As consumer advocate, I will do this job. And the first job, they said, you're a neutral, you're representing the ratepayers, go find someone from the panel to form the panel. So I knew exactly who I was getting. I was going to get Doug Bowman, who had helped us so often. Doug is an expert. He's a technical expert. He's an expert on MOUs. He's worked for the World Bank for years. He's worked in virtually every country on the planet, and he knows this job. And he helped us out dramatically in our cases before the Public Utilities Board, and helped out Tom Johnson too. They know him as well. So I called him and asked him, was he interested in doing this? And he said, sure. He said, I like MOUs. I'd be very interested in doing it. So I got him. I contacted Guy Holborn. Guy Holborn was an expert. He's declared an expert in this province. He spoke at the Muskrat Falls Inquiry. He's an expert in oversight and doing oversight and reviews. And we were doing an oversight. That was our job. Our job was not to review the panel. Our job was to oversight. I couldn't get a third party. I really wanted to get Dr. Jim Feen, but Dr. Feen had already been
Economist,
on
right? Yeah.
the previous panel, the 2041 panel, which was recommended by the commissioner. See, the government followed, which was impressed me too, which is why I agreed to do this. The government followed to the letter what the commissioner had said. The commissioner had said at the end of his case about Muskrat Falls, and we all read what he said there and who was responsible, and it was a boondoggle and was misguided. We all got his evidence. We all know that. But we said, our counsel in our final briefing, and my counsel, by the way, was John Hogan, who became the premier. He was with me the whole 140 days of the inquiry. He knew Muskrat Falls. He knows this stuff inside and out. So we recommended to the commissioner, because all the experts who testified said 2041 is upon us. And for 20 years before that, Hydro-Quebec will want to get the new arrangement in place. So we recommended that the government start preparing for 2041 immediately.
Yeah, because this is when the Churchill Falls deal expires, right? 2041, which is why the group was named that. This is the date everyone's looking for.
Yeah, and that was the date. And that was the date the commissioner said, and the commissioner took our recommendation, gave us full credit for it.
Yeah.
We knew nothing else about it, but the government started acting up on it. They got experts from all over the province. Dr. Feem was on it. I think David Vardy was on it, others. I don't know who, because it's all subject to cabinet confidentiality.
Yeah.
But they also got J.P. Morgan, they got world experts to see what we should do with this, where we should go with it. They had Carl Sullivan on it from Hydro and others. Dennis Mahoney was on it, and there were a lot of others. So they did that all quietly, but it took some years to do.
Yeah.
But and it was during COVID too. Everything sort of slowed down a bit. They looked at all the options. I used to hear people call in online, they're not looking at this option. They looked at everything. Mm-hmm. And there was one conclusion, and it wasn't too different from the conclusion that the commissioner had said. We're going to have to deal with Hydro-Quebec. Mm. So Hydro-Quebec was on the go with a new premier, Francois Legault. He was a business person, one of the founders of Air Transit. He's very well off. He's a businessman, but he knows how to make a deal. So when I was at that meeting I referred to earlier, and it was told to us that he had opened up the agreement. No government in the province had done that, and there was opened up to the tune of 79. That interested me, I must say, but subject to the definitive agreement. So I got this group in place. I couldn't find a third party. I was having great difficulty. I wanted someone familiar with electricity issues, but I couldn't get that. I ended up, I saw where Dr. Wilson, even though he wasn't the current, his professional designation had run out. He had retired, so he wasn't current in his profession and had been retired for, 13 years. I said he can help us with these definitive agreements to make sure the MOU and the definitive agreements match, even though he doesn't really know electricity. And I sent him a lot of papers. I sent him the Muskrat Falls Inquiry, and so he'd become familiar with that. Anyway, he decided to leave the panel.
So you're talking about Michael Wilson,
about 2 months
entrepreneur, former
after.
Ernst & Young executive.
Yeah, so then we moved Holborn, who probably should have been there to begin with, and we had experts. So on our panel, we had 2 experts who would be recognized as experts in a court of law. I was there as chair. I'm not an expert, but I knew a lot of the issues, and that's where we began.
So what do you think about where things are now?
It's funny you should mention that, because we kept, we had meetings with Hydro all of the time, and Hydro had an excellent group working on this. Williams, the president, Walter Parsons was there, who had done the Upper Churchill and the refurbishment of the Upper Churchill for us. He was a prime expert in all this. They had him there. Their lawyer was expert in it, Lauder. He was prime. And they had all these groups around. They had J.P. Morgan. They had our friends Power Advisory. They had Stikeman Elliott. We were briefed by all of them.
Yeah.
And we continued to be briefed by them all. And it was our job to ensure that the definitive agreements and the requirements of them were being met. Our job also was to report to government if we saw anything there which was not met, in our opinion. We had 2 meetings with government in that regard. We met with the Fury government, and we met with John Hogan's government. And we offered to meet, when he got in, with Wakeham's government. I called him, left a message for him. We sent him a report which showed our concerns. Never heard from him. Never bothered to meet with us. I said, if he's not meeting with us, who is he meeting with? So I was very concerned, and then he announced he had this new review panel. We were not a review panel. We were an oversight panel. It wasn't our job to review. All the reviews had been done by J.P. Morgan, but all the experts, they had reviewed it all. The 2041 committee government had. They had reviewed everything. So I said, this is not appropriate, I did not think, because there's a time frame on all of this. And the time frame, they wanted it all done by April.
So then what do you make of, because when we talk about the 2041 group initially for like Muskrat Falls, and then you get people like Uncle Gnarly, Des Sullivan, you have folks who were with 2041 to begin with, and now in this new discussion around the Churchill Falls and the MOU, there are a lot of folks who were worried about it, worried it was a sellout, worried it was a bad deal. You get all these discussions. So you have everything you just laid out, but then there's other folks who've been part of these discussions for a long time who were coming out being very skeptical around things. Like, what did you make of the public discussion from some of your cohort around this?
Well, this is interesting because the commissioner was aware of this, Commissioner LeBlanc.
Yeah.
And he said, when you go to negotiate 2041, don't go back to 1969.
Right.
Now, a lot of people forget, 1969 was not done by Smallwood, it was done by Brinko.
Yeah.
And Hydro-Quebec. Brinko was a private company. We were getting royalties. But when Frank Moores became premier and he had a good group around him, Leo Barry and the others, and there was a fear that Brinko was about to be bought out. They didn't have any money to continue with the project, and therefore the government decided that because Hydro-Quebec could buy them out, the government decided that they very wisely decided that they would buy out Brinko. And therefore, they threatened expropriation. Expropriation didn't occur. So that's how we got the Brinko shares.
Yeah.
So that's how we did it. And it turned out that there was no escalator clause in those shares, so we got that part of the agreement. Otherwise, the agreement was pretty solid. Most people said that. Most experts said that. Now, we had a lot of people who were still worried that we weren't getting the full benefit and et cetera. People are always there. People are always worried. People are always thinks there might be something better there. We had an MOU. It's only an MOU, as Doug Bowman, the expert in MOU, said, why is everyone so excited about the MOU? It's not the MOU, it's the definitive agreements. So, and we took that approach, and my approach for ratepayers was the ratepayers need to see the definitive agreements. We need to see exactly what we're getting. And once we see that, and once all those people who are complaining see that, they might have every right to complain. But don't shut down the process, please.
But isn't there a fear that once the agreement is made, then that's it, right? Like, it's like, oh, we've got an agreement, and the folks who had big questions, if they still were in disagreement with it, then it's too late. And then the ink dries on paper after the signings, and then there you go again.
Well, two factors on there. I assured the ratepayers I would tell them exactly what was in the agreement before it was signed. And I had the understanding from the government that before anything was signed, this would go to the legislature for debate. So everyone would have an opportunity. And we already had J.P. Morgan down. We had Power Advisory. They explained it all perfunctorily. But there's a group of people in the province who think that we'll get a better deal if we wait for 2041, 17 years' time. That's not what the experts said. The experts said Hydro-Quebec will be waiting. They planned 20 years out, and if we're going to get a deal, it should be now. And the commissioner sort of hinted to that in his report. He said in 2010, Hydro-Quebec was having a lot of difficulty, and maybe that was the right time to do a negotiation. But he said, for reasons which I cannot understand, they did not bother to do that approach. So there seemed to be, in the province, this anti-Quebec animus, and a lot of it came from the previous premier. And all of a sudden we had this group formed.
Talking about Danny Williams there, or
And Dunderdale as well. After the MOU was signed, they formed this group, this anti-MOU group, and they all got out there. And quite often what they were saying wasn't accurate. They were told the difference by Hydro. Hydro invited them all to come in, to go over it all piece by piece. Many of them didn't even bother.
So what does that say to you?
I don't know. I guess people have to make up their own minds on that. But we should all have had, the ratepayers have every right to see what those definitive agreements said and what they did for the province. I had a fellow in my office one day. He said, what have they done? He said, what has Wakeham done with that MOU? He said, I'm in the building trades. I've got to go work up in the Yukon. But he said, if they have that project started for me, I got 14 years work with good payout, good pension plan. He said, that's all I need. I will only need to work there. And he said, I can't understand it. And I heard that from others. So I think Wakeham, at the very least, what he should have done was what the current government was doing. Go to get the MOU, be put in definitive agreements, and look at them now. And that was what Hogan said. We will look at them then, and if they are no good, we're out of here. And the public would have to have a discussion on them. That's what should have been done. But to go back and try to review it all, to review what the 2041 took years to do, and that panel they got there isn't much of a panel. They got I saw the picture of the fellow who signed the Muskrat Falls agreement for Emera. I said, what's he doing on that panel? His interests are Emera. And believe you me, when I looked at what Emera got out of that Muskrat Falls project and what they did to us, there wasn't too much they didn't get out of that, or Nova Scotia. Cabot Martin used to say years ago, when they were dealing with Hydro-Quebec and Nova Scotia, he said, when we started to deal with Nova Scotia matters, he said, it sent me back to Hydro-Quebec. He said it was just too much. Nova Scotia wanted too much. Nova Scotia got everything they were asking for, so we got this fellow from Nova Scotia heading our panel. This is ridiculous.
So, yeah, you don't seem to be optimistic about the new panel. What are your thoughts on the possibility of this project going ahead with Premier Wakeham? Because they keep saying they want the best deal possible, right? So this is why they're relooking at things, even though you're saying, well, it's been looked at, and there's, you have folks who have wanted independent review after all of this. What happened? What are your thoughts on just the possibilities or the chances of this moving ahead?
I don't think that this project. I think this project has stalled, and I think Wakeham has stalled it. Now, I took an oath of confidentiality on the MOU, and when I resigned from my job as consumer advocate for the PUB. I'd also resigned from my job as consumer advocate to represent the ratepayers in reference to the MOU. They wanted me out of there. They revoked our MOU panel. They got rid of Doug Bowman, the foremost. I couldn't believe what they were doing here. So anyway, I asked at the time. I said I would like to, and when I talked to the clerk last week, when she told me I was out completely, and not to be able to do this continued work for the ratepayers, I said, I have a right now to speak to the MOU and what we found in the MOU. And she said, you have certain rights, but she said, and I'm going back to look at what rights I do have because I want to inform ratepayers. I intend to inform ratepayers to the best of my ability of what was in that MOU from them, because they've made it a political football. Wakeham has made it a political football with all this, and I don't know who's advising them. There's no transparency. We don't know who the lawyers for this group is. We don't know what they're doing. So I understand he's meeting with Premier Legault today. Premier Legault is on the way out. There's a convention on
he's stepping down, exactly.
April 8th.
Yeah, he's done.
And he's done. And that MOU is not popular in Quebec. It is not popular there with the Parti Québécois and with a lot of the journalists. They felt Quebec was done in. Down here, they had all that crowd on the go, said we felt we were done in. Listen to the commissioner. The commissioner said there has to be a bargain. The bargain has to be struck. And that's what the Power Advisory said to these, and say nationally people think the bargain is struck. They have to get things. We have to get it. Can't be all one way in any way. So, but our ratepayers have every right to know what those definitive agreements, where they were leading. And they got all that shut down. And it's most unfortunate. He should have continued with the process. We would have been way ahead of the game. And people could still have had their say on the definitive agreements. So, but to go back and restart it all, that's nonsense.
Is there anything you think you can say to tell people at this point of what you know you're safe to say around the MOU other than what we've said so far?
I'm reviewing it all, and I think next week I will have something quite definitive to say.
Next week, right? So we're just waiting on. So what do you think? Thinking then is for the ratepayers of the province, with the delay, with Churchill Falls being delayed, and we don't know what's going to happen with it. We'll see what does happen. Overall, what will this mean, do you think, for ratepayers for the province? Because this has to do with the coffers of the money coming into the province, deficits, debt, all of that. If the deal were to have gone ahead, right, money coming in 17 years early, as opposed to like whatever may happen in 2041 if this does not happen. What does this mean for people in Newfoundland and Labrador?
It means we don't have that $17 billion. We could have had that in April. We need that money. We don't have it. We don't have the money to pay for the Muskrat Falls project. The $500 million we need for rates. We're in a pickle. We're in a predicament. So I don't see, if this MOU fails and fails in Quebec, Quebec has other options. They have a lot of options. They don't need to do Gull Island. They would like to do Gull Island, and they're putting all the money into Gull Island. We're not putting it in. We're getting most of it back in time, and we got to. But the experts tell us it's a pretty good deal. So, and the commissioner in his findings, he said Muskrat Falls and Gull Island should have been done together. And indeed, that's what every government in the province said after Smallwood's time. Frank Moore's, Peckford, everyone said it. Clyde Wells, Tobin, they all said the same thing. These should be done together. However, the Nalcor crowd who took over Hydro, a bunch of oil executives, and the government of the day, the Williams government, and then the government of Dunderdale, decided to ignore what every other government had said and to go it alone with Muskrat Falls. And they could only go it alone with us ratepayers paying for it on our bills. It was ridiculous.
So there, Muskrat Falls, Churchill Falls, then also just looking at what's required for electricity in the coming years and the grid that we have in the province on the island. What do you see for what that may mean for expenditure and for the ratepayer? So we have, like you said, there's the $500 million from the feds helping with rates. So we could go up to, as you said, 23. The rate for it.
Well, it could go up to 23 cents a kilowatt.
Exactly, 23 cents a kilowatt.
That's unaffordable.
And then also, though, what else is needed to keep the grid, to keep modernizing the grid for the province?
Well, Hydro has in a number of applications now for the grid. They want to do expansion at Bay de Spear, which probably should have been done. And they want to do a lot of stuff that should have been done in lieu of Muskrat Falls. Remember, there were alternate projects proposed instead of Muskrat Falls. And the commissioner does all that and examines all those in his work, including his view on Quebec and what they could have done in reference to Quebec and the lines coming out of Quebec to get us advantage. So that's all been dealt with. I really recommend to ratepayers, read the commissioner's report, his executive summary. It's an eye-opener. You are all after forgetting what went on here.
Yeah. We have 5 minutes left. I'm just curious then, for you now, as you enter into retirement, like what are you going to be watching, or not retirement? You're going back to law, I should say. You've resigned from your previous post as consumer advocate. What are the things you're going to be watching for, waiting for in the coming months?
Well, I've never left my law firm down in Churchill Square. My law partners, I've always been there as well, because only when applications came in before the PUB was I activated. It's not a full-time position. And that's the other thing I think we need to do. The consumer advocate position needs to be full-time now. There's too much on the go.
Yeah.
I was doing too much in my law firm, and I also had clients and so on, but it needs to be a full-time position. We need a full-time consumer advocate, and that's what the ratepayers are due. And it's really interesting. Before I get to my own private plan, we recommended smart meters, and we've recommended them for 10 years, and everywhere else in the country has got them. And Newfoundland Power is saying we don't need them. It's not the least cost option. It's not the least cost option for whom? Newfoundland Power represents its ratepayers, does not represent its ratepayers. We represent the ratepayers, consumers. They represent their shareholders. We have concluded, as our experts concluded, that smart meters are the least cost option for all the ratepayers. We need to move to these.
So why does Newfoundland Power say regulatory requirements prevent the company from using smart meters?
Yeah, that's a new one they got on me. They said that it's not in the lowest cost option. It is the lowest cost option. Our ratepayers will have the lowest cost option, and they will have options. Newfoundland Power doesn't want them to have options. Newfoundland Power wants to make their $1 million a week for their shareholders, $1 million a week over this small jurisdiction. They want over $50 million annually. They want no change. Smart meters will make a great change to the benefit of ratepayers. It has to go there. And all those people are out there online, all those groups on Facebook. Start a petition. Get 100,000 signatures. Go to the government. Say, we want smart meters. The ratepayers of this part need smart meters. No one seems to be listening.
And we had a call from Alfred on the West Coast to this point, right? He said, questioning how meters are read, and he said, they don't seem to come on your property to read it anymore. Not sure how the device works, but questioning the accuracy, and saying it should be investigated. I will underscore, though, according to Newfoundland Power, they say the meters are 99.9% accurate, exceeding the requirement of 97%. That is from Glendon Power of Newfoundland Power. But here we are, right? Like there's lots of folks who are wondering about the cost of electricity, wondering about their bills, and just to underscore and echo what you're saying there.
Well, it's pretty brazen in Newfoundland Power. Everyone else has smart meters, including all their old subsidiaries, all the Fortis subsidiaries all across Canada have got smart meters. What is wrong with here? And I heard the vice president on Paddy's show, his last show the other day, Paddy, the Daily Show, saying we won't need smart meters for 10 years. I've read and I filed with the board information from all over Canada and the United States saying the meters that they are using are obsolete. They use that word. It's not my word, and we should not have them here. And they don't give us options, and we need them. We need smart meters. We don't need Newfoundland Power telling us what to do. The board should have done this years ago. They go to conferences. They knew what was happening elsewhere. They've been a bit sleepy on it, too. For myself,
you got 30 seconds.
We're going out to dinner to celebrate. I was up in Susan on Saturday night, and we're having all our family in for a dinner on Sunday night. That's our celebration. But I intend to not leave the province. I'm down in my law firm and doing houses, doing everything you do as a lawyer. I continue to do that, and I look forward to meeting the public through there.
Dennis Browne, thank you so much, and thank you for spending the lunch hour with me. And I expect to hear more news from you next week when you can talk about more on the MOU. But thank you, sir, for being my guest today. That is it for the show, folks. Thoughts? The Signal at cbc.ca. You can call the Signal line and leave us a message, 709-576-5260. Coming up tomorrow on the show, 2 episodes of the podcast, This is Newfoundland and Labrador, also hosted by me. First one, a new pickup truck in this economy, why Newfoundland and Labrador's consumer spending is up, and why this province's OG tech investor is still big on the sector. Don't miss tomorrow's show. Cheers. Bye.